What is home care? Home care is a care option that allows an older adult to live in his or her own home and be cared for by a professional. Home care services can often vary, depending on the older adult's health scenario. They can include things like personal care, bathing assistance, transportation, and specialized Alzheimer's care. Home care is also flexible in scheduling, ranging from a few hours per day to around-the-clock service. Most providers will create a unique care plan tailored to the needs of the individual. Then from there, a schedule is set for a professional caregiver to arrive at the appointed times and provide one-on-one care in the home. The three most common reasons for home care: 1. Life enhancement through social interaction and companionship. This includes such things like cooking meals, playing games, and transportation to appointments. 2. Acute care for chronic conditions such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. 3. Safety of having someone to provide personal care and administer medication, reducing the possibility of pandemic exposure. To find out more about home care, visit homeinstead.com.
Hello. Good morning. Hi, I'm Mark White. Welcome to the second annual No Place Like Home Symposium. And what does that mean? It means it's our second one, because last year was the first one. It hadn't been a year yet. So now it's been a year, and this is number 2. So thank you for joining us today. We are happy to have, we've got some really great presenters with us, so you don't have to rely wholly on me. And we've got a lot of stuff to cover, so glad to have you. I would get a notepad and take some notes. We're going to have some things available to you that you can download and use, but you really want to take some notes, and you want to remember some of the names of the people that we talked about today. We've got some sponsors that we're very grateful to. We've got Home Instead, and Home Instead, we've known those folks for a long time, and we're so grateful to have them sponsoring this Blue Cross of Idaho and the True Blue Special Needs Plan. There'll be information available on that as well. And our host is the Garden Plaza in Valley View. The great folks here have offered up this room. And so we're happy to have them on as a partner with us. The theme for us this year is a wholehearted approach to multi-generational living and aging. And now, if you want to know that, really, one of the things that we see in our office a lot is the folks in that sandwich generation, which means they're concerned about their parents, and at the same time they're worried about the kids, and it's just hard to get everything done and taken care of. And so we thought that this year we would target in on that sandwich group that are concerned about the folks, have some questions, and they're going to have some issues, and they're not exactly sure what needs to be done, so we thought we would offer up some ideas and some concepts, and we have great people here that will help us to do that. So today we're going to start with kind of what we call surviving the crisis, meaning things are going to happen, they're going to happen quickly, and how do we get through this? Is there some information that will help us as kids to get folks through that? So our first segment today is the fall and the call. And I'll ask the panel in a minute, but I think we'll see quite a few falls is kind of the thing that initiates the process where people are moving in the hospital and then to rehab and then to long-term care. So we're going to focus in on that. All right, and as we talk through this, we will give you some ideas, some things to think about, and hopefully some things to talk to your parents about. Because when that call comes in, there's a whole bunch of questions that will be answered in a short period of time. And boy, we urge our clients anyway to be thinking about that ahead of time, rather than wait until this thing happens. So, again, I'm Mark White, Idaho State Planning, where law firm we do elder law and estate planning, and we work with a lot of these good folks. Fortunately, they know more than we do about these things. So let me introduce our folks. I've got Gerald Bosen to my right. I've known Gerald for 4 years. Okay, that's long enough, we think. But he's really been a help to me, and I appreciate that. Born and raised, he's an Idaho boy from Pocatello. I'm reading the cards here, just giving you that. Master's degree in public health from Idaho State. And I tried getting the kids to Idaho State. I just love it.
And you were an administrator in training program back in 2000. This gives away a little bit how old you are. He's been a licensed skilled nursing facility administrator since 2001. So you got the cred, man. You got street cred.
8 years.
Yeah. You're still doing it.
Still doing it.
And you know what I like is that you're still smiling.
I like that.
Because it's kind of rough right now. There's a lot of work being done.
It's a tough time.
Then you took a job up in Walla Walla with the Sunbridge folks, and you went very well. You're back to Idaho because this is where you're from. Love it. And you are presently administrator for the Life Care Centers in Idaho. Oh, you were in, I didn't know this, Life Care Centers in Idaho Falls for 2 years.
Yep.
And then you came back out this way.
Right.
And presently, I know you were in Weiser, because that's where I ran into you.
That's where I spent the majority of my.
Very good. And now you are at Life Care Centers in Boise. And you did Emerson House in between.
Correct.
And we got to know each other a little bit better at Emerson House. You did a great job there. And then got you back, and you are back here in the Treasure Valley. Thank you for being with us. Be patient with my attempts at humor. I appreciate that. And again, I love it that you're still smiling after being
It's Botox.
I have a joke about that. I'm not gonna go there. So, Jamee Nowlin is to his right, and she's a field captain with the Ada County Paramedics, and so that fits right in with what we're talking about this morning. And you know what? People get so worked up about interfacing with paramedics, and we're going to talk about this. So I'll quit right now. In a little Walla Walla, Washington, you got a bachelor's of art in studio art.
Yes. Yes, oddly enough.
I love that. I really do. I do. I think that's awesome. And I've been to the Whitman College there in Walla Walla. I didn't go there, but I've been there. And associate's degree in paramedicine from Colorado Mountain College in Vail. That's too bad.
I know. It's rough. It's rough. It's rough.
Sorry about that. And worked as a paramedic for Grady EMS in Atlanta. That probably kept you busy.
Yes.
It's a big town.
It's a big town. It's much different than here, so I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, we're glad to have you here. And now you're here at the Ada County Paramedics. You've been here 7 years, and you've held the position of student mentor, which is got to be a lot of fun.
It's very fun. Yeah. All the new paramedic students, mostly from ISU. They're great.
Very good.
Great program.
We've got the connection going. I love that. And a field training officer, and you've been a field captain for not too long. About a month. And you're still smiling, so that's
yeah.
I love it. I love it. And then Kimberly Ouwehand is with Terrace Health, and she's the Director of Community Relations, which she should be.
I talk a lot.
Well, we know you and know you for some time, and you just do a really good job. We got a certification in value-based healthcare at Boise State, so we got the home folks here. I love it. And I know you've been active on different community boards, community health organizations, the Idaho Health Continuum of Care Alliance.
I know, mouthful.
That was a Justice Alliance for Vulnerable Adults, and IGFA, which is the Idaho Guardian and Fiduciary Association, and the Idaho Caregiver Alliance. Whoa! And what do you do for fun?
What do I do for
You're an Idaho ambassador for the Forum of States with the National Association for Home Care, and the founder of Smart Workshops that bring education to caregivers throughout the Treasure Valley, and the director of the Teal Chair documentary. And if you haven't seen that documentary, we really need to do that, the Teal Chair. And do you have a website for that? I can't remember.
I don't really have a website yet, but I'm working on a new bit to bring it kind of back.
Oh, very
People
good.
about their local film.
Excellent, excellent. And I know you were in hospice for 8 years before the Terrace Health, and you advocate for quality of life and choice, which I think we're going to talk a little bit, whether we like it or not today. That's going to be a part of the discussion. And yes, you are passionate
I am.
about working with people, and so this would be great to have you. So this morning, I want your input into, just kind of the process. What happens? Somebody makes a phone call. Either they found mom on the floor, or somebody does a welfare check, and mom's not doing well, or dad's not doing well, and then they put in the phone call. Jamie, you guys probably get the phone call first.
Right. So that would be the start of the chain of events, right?
Yeah, I guess. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, so basically we're gonna go from phone calls already happened, right?
Yeah.
To the fire department usually gets there first, sometimes the paramedics will get there first. And then what happens is the fire department will gain access to the residents. We will come in as well. Sometimes they'll start with the vital signs and everything, and they are gonna have a sense of urgency when they get there, right? Until they do their initial assessment and we decide, is this an acute injury? Meaning, is this like serious?
Right.
Is this something that warrants like moving a little bit faster, or just kind of getting work done? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Okay.
yeah. Having seen this.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so usually everybody starts to relax after the initial assessment and the vital signs are taken, and then the questions start happening, right? And the most common questions that they're going to lead with is they want to get their demographics down. They want to get their age, birth date, full name, social security number, mailing address, things like that, while somebody else is taking vital signs and somebody else is doing an assessment of injury or assessment of illness or whatever might be happening.
But this is, you mentioned this just before we came on. This is like the first round of those questions.
Right.
They're going to get asked these questions again.
Unfortunately, yes, these questions are repetitive. So
there's that prompted me to think through this. Now, is there something that the family can do so that we can hand that information to you sooner?
absolutely.
Or is this part of the process to see how mom's doing or dad's doing by asking the questions?
It is important when the patient or whoever is being cared for, it's important to establish their frame of mind, right? So we need to really establish, are they able to answer the questions? Are they answering them appropriately? Can they answer the questions? We need to we call it a baseline mentation. So we need to get a really good feel for what that is. It's very, very important with their care. It's very important to establish that so we know how fast we need to move. Because if we have somebody who can normally carry on a conversation and can normally answer basic questions appropriately, who all of a sudden cannot, that's very concerning. And that actually puts a big sense of urgency into what we're doing.
But you have those that can't answer.
Yes, we do. We do often have people, with baseline dementia or Alzheimer's who are unable to do that. So things that the family can have ready for us are, a list of medications is really important. Current list of medications is very important. If you can know if any of their medications have changed recently, that's also very important because sometimes that can affect how they're acting or their physical presentation. Some of these medications can interact with each other, and unfortunately, all doctors and caregivers don't always communicate about medications, and so there might be things that we can find there that can help explain what's going on, some of it. So a current list of medications is really important. Also, a current list of health issues, so diagnosed health issues up to that point, including a list of whether your family member has ever had a stroke or, a major medical issue like a heart attack or
Going back
major
to dealing with dementia.
Yeah, diagnosed with dementia or major falls that have caused deficits somewhere, like they might be, have limited mobility on one side of their body. It helps us kind of with our triage concept where we can kind of move through these questions and look at these lists and see like, okay, yes, there is a history of generalized weakness on the left side. So then we can rule out a stroke right away. So other things also, any recent paperwork that if they've been to the hospital or been to the ER, just recent things that they've been there for. So keeping a nice organized file of any diagnosis that has been made in an ER or for an ER visit recently is also very helpful.
Now, the question I get asked a lot is, how do we get that information to you? Now, if the kids show up and they know where to find it, they can get that to you.
Sure.
But if we have someone who is cognitively unable to answer, and they're there by themselves, this is like no family to help out, is there a place that we can post this information? Is there a place that we can put it that you all will know to look?
On the fridge.
On the
The
fridge.
magnet is a really good place. So
Okay.
to have a copy of their advanced directives, their DNR, their medication list, including allergies,
Yeah.
recent health diagnosis, any paperwork that could be pertinent to anything with their health history. Nice magnet on the fridge is great, or somewhere just, on the kitchen bar or on a desk that's in the living room or the open living space while we're kind of looking around and in the residence, just trying to figure out where everything is. Having your medications, if you have them in bottles, just having them all in one spot. So we can see the medications if they're on the counter or just accessible is a good place. I mean, I've lived in people's bathrooms before. I've lived in kitchen cupboards, but just having it out and readily available, just in an accessible place is very helpful.
Now, I read that California, a few years back, made a big push to have everybody roll that up and put it in the freezer.
Really?
So that when you walked in, that paramedics walk in or the emergency personnel could go to the freezer and look, and they had a tube with everything in it.
I've not heard of the freezer.
Ah.
I don't think I've officially ever looked in anyone's freezer. But I mean, it's also a place, I suppose. I think maybe a kitchen cupboard or a bathroom cupboard
Would be a
or
little bit
tacked to
better.
the fridge would be a little more obvious and easier, but
So this seems to me at a point where the kids could really get involved with mom or
Absolutely.
dad and help to
Absolutely.
develop this list of information and figure out where to post it.
Yeah.
And so, you need the list of medications, which you probably, because they ask me every time I go into a doctor's shop, every medication and vitamin and supplement and how much you're taking, and how often you're taking those. Is this all the
It's very
information
helpful,
that you
yes,
have?
it's very helpful, plus allergies, plus
Yeah.
emergency contact numbers. You know, obviously, like I said, the advanced directives are helpful as well, if you have those, and the current health diagnoses.
Got it. And so part of that, then you'd be able to get information about the current doctor, their physician. And then, yeah, the ability to get hold of the kids or that contact person, I think would be huge.
Yeah, and also, you know, it's helpful to, some people have pets that they're very worried
Oh, yeah.
about, you know, that's a big thing, is people are very worried about their cats or their dogs, and so if you wanna leave information about, you know, who we need to call for that, or, you know, if you'd like us to even put food out for your cat, depending on, you know, it's also situation dependent. If it's a really critical emergency, some of that stuff is gonna get lost in translation, unfortunately, but, you know, we can always give it to the nurses, pass it to the nurses at the hospital. You know, they're great at doing emergency contacts and helping people take care of their homes or, you know, just whatever they need.
So when you come into that situation, the first is really diagnostic. What's going on? Get them stabilized, and then ship them off.
Right, and so another thing that's very helpful to have is also, of course, this is all dependent on how emergent the situation is, right? Is what I like to call a go bag. Is a good concept.
What my wife had when she was pregnant.
Right,
Towards the end,
exactly.
here's the go bag.
Exactly. So I call it a go bag. You can call it whatever you want, your emergency bag, and have it be a mid-sized bag that has bright colors, that has a zipper closure on it, and put it somewhere that is accessible, like the coat closet in the front, or in the entryway, or just with somewhere the firemen or we can find it to grab it for you. And then, like, good things to have in your go bag are things like another copy of all your paperwork. Because unfortunately, unfortunately, things do get kind of shuffled around, and that paperwork can get left at the house, or it can get left, you know, God forbid, in the ambulance or something. So having multiple copies of all that information is very useful. Other things that you can keep in your go bag are a change of clothing, pajamas or actual clothes for when you get discharged. You can keep some like non-skid socks in there. Those are also very helpful in the hospital.
Warm feet.
Warm
It's
feet,
huge.
yes, it's
Vital.
huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
And also, you know, if you're, you know, we have some patients who, you know, they always want to make sure they have their makeup on and they're very, you know, presentable. So if you want to keep personal items in there, like extra makeup or a comb or, you know, just anything that can help you feel less like you're going away from your home into this really scary situation. Phone chargers, cell phone, accessories, your hearing aids, that's a big one, right? Extra set of dentures. I mean, it sounds silly, but
Like your toothbrush and
your
all that kind of
toothbrush,
stuff.
toothpaste, even, you know, depending on the situation, some bottled water or healthy snacks for when you get cleared by the doctor to actually
Oh,
have
very good.
something
Yeah.
that you would like to eat or drink. You know, the nurses right now, they're so busy and they really want to accommodate everybody, and they do such a great job, but they really can't do everything. So having some of your over-the-counter medications also, like Tylenol or ibuprofen or antacids, or just a book, magazine, crossword puzzles, tablets, and your charger. I mean, you can put whatever you'd like in there, really, but it's really very helpful to have some of those things ready to go with you.
Now, the kids, if they get involved with this up front, then they're the ones that can grab the bag and go. But again, there's plenty that don't have that resource available. So this would be good to think through all this, have it ready to go, and then you guys do a good job. If you're all looking for this, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's, you know, everybody kind of works together as a team, and if you need things to help your mobility too when you get discharged, don't forget your cane. You know, if you want to bring your walker, we can certainly bring the walker in the ambulance. They fold up, they fit nicely right in the back department. So make sure that if any of that stuff is needed, that we can bring that as well.
Okay, so again, twofold thank you, by the way. That was awesome. All this stuff.
And your wallet.
Oh, yeah.
House keys and wallet, let me not forget to mention
Oh,
that.
perfect.
I'm making notes.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I didn't even think about that, but
Well, yeah. And so our recommendation is there are people of a certain age, and we won't tell you what age that is for you, that you should pay attention to all this.
Well, it's good for everyone. It's not just for,
Yeah,
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 it's actually very useful for everybody.
to have a go back.
Yeah.
And then, again, for the kids that are trying to take care of mom and she's at home and because she has to be at home. And it's good for the kids to go through this with mom or with dad and pull this information together and pull the go bag together and have that ready to go. Very good. Thank you, thank you.
you're welcome.
I love it. We're going to skip Mark Fuller right now, and we're going to play that video at the end. And Mark is going to walk us through what happens when we land at the hospital and the decisions that need to be made then, and some suggestions on, what the kids can be thinking about beforehand. Because that is not a good place for kids to not agree on what needs to happen. It would be best if those plans have been already worked out. So, we're going to come back. Mark, if you're watching, it's probably asleep. He's probably asleep. All right, so, Gerald,
Yes.
let's skip over the hospital bit for a minute and talk about the discharge process, and then so often they go into a rehab situation, and they're not sure what that means, and they think they might be in rehab forever, and they don't know how to pay for it, and then they think, okay, then I'm going into skilled nursing. And you and I have talked, and that isn't necessarily as they think it will be.
Very good.
So enlighten us a little bit. What do you see? What do you, when people come, what are they thinking, and what do you help them to?
Well, I think once they've gone through the trauma at the hospital and the fall beforehand, one of the biggest fears is that they don't want to be placed in a home. And if you grew up in the 70s like I did, and you ever visited a nursing home back then, they were pretty scary places. And I'm actually shocked that I went into the nursing home industry after some of my experiences as a kid. But they are very different. So people naturally have that thought, I don't want to go there, I don't want to go there. And for good reason. I mean, no one wants to have someone take care of them 24 hours a day. And that's what a skilled nursing facility does, is it takes care of people that can't take care of themselves. However, the big thing that most people don't understand is most people that come to a skilled nursing facility are able to go home, or at least to a lower level of care after being in our facility.
You were telling me that the average that you see is like a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, and that's changed over the last several years, but yeah, even down to a week a lot of times.
Oh my goodness.
Especially with insurances that are involved with Medicare now. And Medicare will tell you get up to 100 days, but I don't even remember the last time anyone actually reached the 100-day mark anymore. And the average is 7 to 21 days that people are in a skilled nursing, or at least in the skilled phase of the skilled nursing facility. And like I said, 70 to 80% that go through that initial skilled part are able to go somewhere else. And ideally home, but that's not always the case either. And I think that's at that point, that's the hardest point, because mom or dad that are in the skilled nursing facility, yeah, they want to go home. I mean, they don't want to think about anything possibly else. And then we're telling them, you know, that's great, but can you be with them all the time? Because they could be at home if you're with them. And that's rarely the case, so.
We're gonna be talking about
Yeah.
the plans that most people have, which, and what we've seen, the plan is, well, Gerald would just come to my house and take care of you, right?
Yeah.
That's what mom thinks.
You're gonna quit your job and you're gonna live with me.
Or somebody's gonna quit their job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? And you have children that get into those situations that say, oh, well, I gotta do it. I gotta
Yeah.
quit this 20-year career so I can take care of mom. And I mean, I personally, in that sandwich generation, I recently lost both parents and gone through these decisions. And when I went through it with my father first, and we were not prepared at all. When my father went into the situation, had to go into skilled nursing, ended up passing there. But we had, you know, because my mom was not able to take care of him. And the children, 7 of us, bless their hearts, all have different opinions about what should happen.
No. I don't believe it.
Even though we love each other, yeah. Crazy. So it's something you want to talk about.
Yeah, it's not just different opinions,
Yeah.
but you've got, in my family, we've got kids spread around, so they can't. And we'll talk about this as we go along in the symposium, but dang it, there's always the one poor daughter who lives a mile away,
Yeah.
and she's it.
And yeah, generally,
she can't do it
generally it's there's one kid that kind of takes the brunt of everyone, and everyone blames everything on this poor child, which is really unfortunate. So, you know, obviously pre-planning, talking about this, but it's something that doesn't happen, unfortunately. So after skilled nursing, yes, we can get them out of there, but there are lots of decisions that need to be made at that point, and that's some tough times and tough discussions that families have to go through.
Well, and what makes it particularly difficult, in my view, is the stress of everything else that's going on right now.
Yes.
Right? So you got all of this pressure, and then the family's trying to make decisions, and people all grieve differently. We're talking about anticipatory grief here,
Yep.
and they all express it so completely differently, and we're trying to bring them all together, and even, Mom and Dad may have had a particular view of how they wanted things to happen, but often it's not a real accurate view. I mean, it's not a real feasible scenario that they were hoping for.
Yeah, and more often than not, the parents have made the kids promise that they would never do this to them also, so there's guilt that
So,
just eats at people.
So, let me ask you, because I have you here and I can ask this question now. When mom comes to the kids and say, you promise I'll never go into a home. And of course, they don't know what a home means anymore. That's a completely different scenario. But when they go to the daughter or to the son, and I know some sons that are just, their hearts are butter and they melt, and mom says, promise me. But what should you do at that point?
That's a good question. At that point, if people feel comfortable, and they should, because and COVID's kind of changed this a little bit, but if you can bring them into that environment before any of this happens, so they can see, oh, this is not such a bad place. There's professionals, they take care, this is what happens, this is the kind of meals they're going to get. If they can at least, whether it's visit someone they know or something like that, at least give them some exposure so that they're, because like I said, a lot of us grew up with really bad experiences.
Yeah. Well, and
those are in our mind.
Yeah,
and that's why they make their kids first. No, don't do this to me.
I'm not going to do this. And
it's
so
just not that way.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer, and you were the expert, so that's why I asked you to see if there's something that the kids can do. And I like your idea of.
But even if they can't expose mom to that, they should at least research it or go look themselves
Yeah.
and be able to explain that, no, it's not like you're thinking, mom.
Or perhaps an answer that they could give is, Mom, we'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. We'll make sure that you
That's a great one.
have the best quality of life.
If you can do that without promising, that's
Stealing from Kimberly down there, we're gonna give you the best quality possible. And then that leaves it open, because we may need, rehab and skilled nursing.
Yeah.
All right, so,
Then, also with that point, because generally most people have their skilled nursing cover the cost, or at least
Yeah.
most of it.
yeah,
And so that's another leads into really scary questions when it comes to money. And those should be talked about ahead of time, or because when you get to that point, there are some very, very scary questions and discussions that have to occur if it has not been talked about beforehand too.
so, let's be precise about that for just a minute. What the questions that I get a lot are, well, I have Medicare now. Doesn't Medicare pay for rehab and skilled nursing? And the answer is, you mentioned this before, yeah, there might be 110 days, but I don't know anyone that's gone that far.
So yeah, you're looking at probably a week to 3 weeks, if you're lucky.
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of pressure on the doctor to find that they've plateaued, and we're gonna move them out, right? And then, so the next place is to move into the skilled nursing, this Medicare cover skilled nursing,
Yes.
okay?
Traditional Medicare covers skilled nursing as long as there's a need, and there's a criteria of what the need is. They'll cover 100% for 20 days. After that, day 20, there's a copay that has to be made, and you can get that copay covered through other insurances.
Right.
But what we see today, most people don't have traditional Medicare anymore. Most people have managed Medicare plans, and so they have Medicare, but each plan is different, and some may charge you initially right away, like a copay. Some may do the start at day 20 like regular Medicare. But the thing with managed care also is you have to get, the skilled nursing facility has to get okay from the insurance company, generally in 7 day segments. So, okay,
Oh, boy.
we'll take care of you. Yeah, you're approved for 7 days. When you get to the end of the 7 days, if we still think they need skilled care, then we have to get another 7 days from the insurance, and that doesn't always. And sometimes they go, no, they're at a level they can go home. And we may disagree with that, but unless the family wants to pay the bill,
You're not in charge of that.
yes, we're not.
No, somebody else is. Okay, so here's what I'm hearing and thinking. We do have some coverage in skilled nursing, and if they don't have coverage with Medicare, there might be some private insurance.
There's some. It's rare.
Yeah, yes, I understand. And so this afternoon, I'm going to be talking a little bit about some other benefits that are available, but Medicaid, isn't that the biggest payer for skilled nursing?
Yes. So if unfortunately some do have to live with us full time, and they'll stay there until they end up passing. For those, the majority of those either have to spend all their assets and then go on to Medicaid, or if they don't have anything currently, then we generally can get them on Medicaid, and then their options are pretty much gone at that point.
Got it. So, so we get this, you and I talked about this a little bit, and it just came clear a little bit to me. We got 7 days, so you're approved for 7 days. At the end of the 7 days, you're done.
Yeah,
And now we've got kids and people scrambling.
we usually know only a day ahead of
I'll
time.
get it. And so what are we trying to decide in that 24 hours now that we know they're going to discharge you on?
we're using our social work, our case managers at that point deciding, okay, it looks like mom's gonna be at this level. Do you have the resources at home for her to be at this level? And that may be someone checking on her once a day, or it may be someone needs to actually live there and help her with all these, this, and this. Because if you don't have those options, then you're gonna have to look at other options, which may be even, assisted living or something like that.
And of course, with the COVID thing happening, assisted living is not real attractive to a lot of people. They're gonna try to be home.
Yep.
And so we've got family now scrambling within a 24-hour period to make this work out. And I think what you would suggest is they'd be thinking about this at least a week ago, a month ago, a couple of years ago, even
Ideally, yes.
yeah, even further back. Again, because we're talking about that situation where, dang it, we've got all this stress going on anyway, and now we're making decisions.
Well, and one thing, like I said, I did this with my own parents, and with my father, it was a fiasco, and lots of hard things to go through. With our mother, we knew that her health was starting to fail, so we talked to her, and luckily we're in this industry, so we could explain. But we basically knew that she was going to have to go into assisted living because there was no way any of us could live with her 24 hours a day. So we basically had her shop around before she got to that point. And so she knew that even if she had to go into skilled nursing, this is where she would want to go if it came to that point. And it was an actually very easy transition at that point. Very good. And she never did actually have to go into skilled nursing, which was great. Which if you can avoid that, that's great.
Okay, so Kimberly, you're the last one.
Last but not least.
Can you pick up and help us now, help families to, because we've kind of set this up. I don't know, this is where you pick this up all the time.
I think healthcare in general is getting moving more towards healthcare in the homes. We're seeing that home health and home care, personal care services, and hospice and even palliative care is hospitals in the home. And so we're seeing this move more in that direction. And so this is perfect for me because what we're seeing and what our company's been able to do is this transition to home. So how do you transition these families that started in a crisis, maybe haven't had those discussions that they've had to have, and then all of a sudden see all these dynamics come into play. And so it's amazing how little we are prepared because we don't know when to start preparing. But usually,
Well, if we knew that,
yeah,
we wouldn't need attorneys.
exactly. Well, no, we still need attorneys. But once a crisis starts, then all of a sudden it starts that learning process, and you're forced to learn. And so, like things that I'm still learning this even now, but just like having a go big. Like when you're pregnant, you have 9 months to prepare. Like you're going to be pregnant. You're going into the hospital. They have this really great postpartum, program for you, but as you get older, you don't know how long it's going to be. You don't know how severe it's going to be. You don't know anything. So it always starts with the crisis. And I love the go big thing, just so you know, when you start using that one. And then once you get to the hospital, then you go into skilled nursing. And these different silos of healthcare make it difficult for families to navigate because they don't know exactly what the next step is. But what we're finding is that patients and clients are getting discharged at a higher acuity of care, and they're getting discharged with home health, but there's this little tiny gap of 3 days. And that's where I like to jump in, and that's where those are the times that you can start talking to families and saying, okay, mom wants to come home. She's adamant about coming home. She's put the family on, alert. And so the family's kind of like, I got to do this, like you said. Like I've got a son who has a heart of butter and I can't do this to mom. So they bring them home, but then all of a sudden they realize that they left in crisis, number one, that they've been rehabbing, but their favorite chair that they wanted to sit in is no longer able to help them get up and out of the chair. And the three things that we find is that getting to their chair, their favorite place to live, to the bathroom, and then to bed are the three major problems of going home. And you can't have 24-hour care there to help them do that. So what we like to do is go in there and say, okay, look, this is, maybe you need to get a lift chair. And how many times have we talked to our parents about needing a fall alert button? They, no, we don't need it. They get home and they're like, I think they need a fall alert button. We can hook that up right away, right there and then. They don't want to have maybe, rails put in their bathrooms. We can get that set up right then and there. And so it's that time of crisis where you start having these conversations. And so usually what we can do then is be that gap for the home health, saying it takes a couple days for them to get set up. They have to get doctor's orders. They have to get their plan of care in order so that it's the best care for you in the home. Sometimes what happens is when the patient gets home, then we also notice really you are appropriate for hospice, or you really are appropriate for an assisted living. And because they're in that crisis mode and they don't want to go back to the hospital or have to call 911 or go back to skilled nursing, they're a little more open to having those conversations. And the other thing that we've seen is, and this is where the attorneys and the estate planning comes in, is okay, if you haven't done this already, let's start getting that organized, because it may be too late for mom, but it might not be too late for dad, and it definitely isn't too late for Uncle Tom. So all of a sudden this huge learning curve is placed before them, and then we can help them navigate through that, because we can see it face to face in their homes and see exactly what's going on. And that's great when you have, sometimes you go home and you have, the mom's been in skilled nursing, has been rehabbed from a fall with a broken hip, but the husband has dementia. So how do you solve? He's got the strength, she doesn't. She's got the brains, he doesn't. So how do you manage all of that to make sure that it's still successful, that the families can manage that, and that you can help the families navigate through that? And then usually by the third day, it's a 3-day transition, that program that we have, but by the third day, almost 100% we can get advanced care directive. And now I'm going to start getting a go bag ready. I'm going to have a folder, maybe a red light folder that we say, okay, this is when you call the emergency room, you need this stuff. You need to know who your attorney is. You need to know all your emergency contacts. You need to know your neighbors in case they have to come over and take care of their pets. Those are things that we don't think about, we don't really want to plan for because we don't know, but it starts with an urgent crisis. And that's where I feel like we can gap that. It's in and out, it's high intensity. I feel like we might be in we need an ambulance. I know. Every time I go to these things, I'm like, oh, that's so brilliant, So, but starting to work with patients when they're it's a crisis, and we need all of us as a team to help get them back home so that they're home safely and where they want to be. Again, it is quality of life. Nobody wants to move from their home, and that's the hard thing. One other thing that we've seen are these solo agers where they live by themselves. They really maybe have a neighbor or two who can check in. They go into the hospital with 911, and then they end up in the emergency room. They end up in skilled nursing. So they've been away from their home for 3 weeks. They come home, the refrigerator has rotten milk, there's bad food, the garbage hasn't been taken out for 3 weeks. There's a lot of just cleanup that needs to set them up.
The cat would be okay. A dog, we would worry about.
We've had a couple people where, the neighbor, thankfully, they do remember that there's a cat, and somehow they can figure out somebody to come over. But they'll take care of the cat litter and feed the dog. But there's still other things that need to be looked at that time.
So you said something that's very interesting, and maybe take a little pressure off of families and mom and dad, and then reapply it a little bit differently. It's much easier when we have the stress, right?
Well,
We
yeah.
have this crisis, and we got to make these decisions, even with 7 kids. We're going to try to figure it out, which indicates that when there's not that urgency, it's difficult for the family to come together and make these plans.
Correct.
But the flip side of that is that mom can have more input into the plan
Right.
if we're doing it before there's all that stress.
Right.
And so, for the kids that are watching, and when I say kids, I mean those that are Gerald or my age, this is something to sit down with mom and dad. Do you have some thoughts, any of the 3 of you, do you have some thoughts on how to have a conversation, how to begin it? I mean, because these are tough. This is a tough conversation to have.
I find that in the hospital they have that conversation. They have that conversation in skilled nursing. I find that we're talking about it a lot more, about having these conversations, but it's hard I've even had conversations with my parents, and I'm in the industry, and it's still hard for me to get them to say, okay, like, if I can't take care of you, nobody can take care of you, where do you want to, what does your life want to need to look like? You can get bits and pieces of it, but you probably won't get that whole. I mean, some people are really organized, and I think along with what Gerald said is money is a big issue. People, especially as you get older, you hang on to your money tighter, and so you know that if you go into an assisted living, you're going to have to pay. It's expensive.
Well, people want to give an inheritance to their children too,
Yeah, for sure.
and that's a huge deal to them. They could care less about their money, but they want to give something to their kids, and so they're terribly scared of spending all their money away.
You can tell your kids though, I mean, this is what I told my mom and dad, I'm like, thank you so much for having enough money to take care of yourself. Like, I don't care about any money, that's what we're doing for our kids, is like, just make sure I have enough money so that the financial burden doesn't go on to your kids.
Yes, and that's easily said, but there is a generation where it's hardwired into them. It's hardwired. They are not a good parent unless they leave some of their kids. And I've fought this for 30-something years, and I've made no progress with it.
One thing, because my mom was definitely of that generation, and she was worried about leaving something. So we talked her into doing things while she was still healthy. She took us all on a cruise, which was fabulous, fantastic. And she felt like she was getting back at something. And it was a wonderful thing. Now, obviously not everyone has options like that, but that is one option to, let's spend it now while you can enjoy it and see us enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because if you're young, it really doesn't matter.
We do have that conversation quite a bit. Parents waiting and going, you know what? And then maybe you don't have to give as much. I'm just thinking. Well, listen, I think what we want to do right now is run the conversation, or the monologue that I had with Mark Fuller. I think it's very helpful, and you're going to all look at this and go, that's what about. And then we'll get back together right after we finish that, and then I think there's a little bit of discussion that can wrap that up. I want to introduce Mark Fuller today. Mark, when I first met you, Mark, you'd finished up your bachelor's of nursing. You were working on a master's of nursing, working on a license for a nurse practitioner. Fill me in. What's happened since then?
So I completed my master's and decided to go on to complete my DNP, a doctorate of nursing practice, before taking my exam as a nurse practitioner. And so I am just at the forefront. So essentially the DNP has something like a PhD at the end of your program. It's like a dissertation. It's called a project for your DNP. And so I'm actively working on that. And after that, I'll complete my exam for being a nurse practitioner, a family nurse practitioner.
Yeah, and in between all that, you got into hospital administration.
I did, yes, yeah. So I worked at a local hospital in administration, kind of helped supervise the whole hospital. And I've also come from home health, home care,
Yeah.
consulting for skilled nursing facilities as well. So kind of the broad spectrum of pathway of which individuals could potentially go through in the medical field.
And in addition to that, you're married and you have 2 groaning boys.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. We were discussing this earlier, giving me more gray hair every day.
Yeah. Now, are they golfers like you are?
I've been teaching them to golf, so this
Okay.
is good.
I
They're
know
doing well.
you did tennis. Tennis was a big thing for you in college, but I know you golf. And
Yes, yes.
all right.
So yeah, we're, you put in the time now so you can enjoy it later,
You hope so anyway. So one of the things that we're trying to get done this morning, so this will play in the morning. And so one of the things we're trying to do is set up. People struggle in thinking ahead a little bit on long-term care issues. And so very typically from what we see, family members get pulled in often as the plan, all right? Instead of having a plan with long-term care insurance and, other things that need to happen, I have a lot of parents who have told me that it's okay because their kids will just step in and take care of them, or they're going to go live with the kids. And well, okay, but Mark, you're in a position to help us understand, well, what does that really mean to step in and, kind of be the long-term care plan. And we thought you could shed light on kind of that hospital experience, like from rolling in the first place, whether it's in the car or in the ambulance. And then what are some of the decisions that families then need to make that perhaps they haven't talked about before then? So I know that's a lot to cover, but we have a fall, we have a stroke or something like that, they're wheeled into the hospital. Take us through that a little bit. What's going on from, say, the clinical side, and then how the family interacts with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of an important place to start, I think, because a lot of times that's where the family decision-making starts. A lot of times that the reason for that is because, let's say for a fall, often I hear from family that they didn't know mom and dad were so bad, whether that's physically, mentally. And a lot of reasons for that, especially if there's a spouse involved, is you see accommodation from the spouse little by little over years and years and years, which tends into maybe even say full accommodation. And so, some individuals come in because of a fall, because they didn't have a grab handle, or they didn't have the adequate physical therapy, or they were getting more weak, or they weren't using the appropriate device. And all of a sudden it's kind of a shock to the family that, hey, mom or dad fell. Now we're looking at what? A broken hip? Are we looking at just hit his head? Is it because of a stroke that they fell? Is there other issues like dementia? And it starts to shed light on what's really happening in the home very quickly. And, from a light standpoint, just like, let's say from just a conversation, it's, hey, mom or dad fell. We need to make some decisions on what we're going to do and where they're going to go to make sure that whatever deficits they may have, whether it be clinical, physical, mental, that there's appropriate accommodations made. And all of a sudden that decision-making process is kind of the domino effect starts. And without the appropriate planning, a lot of times that defaults onto that strong, son or daughter who's willing to take charge, or potentially the spouse. And whether or not that's been discussed, you're kind of doing it from a blank slate. And a lot of times this is being done for families for the first time. They haven't experienced this before. They don't know what to do or where to go. So that's from a fall standpoint, and you can see all of a sudden that decision-making capacity on what's happening. Now let's add maybe a stroke. Somebody comes in for a stroke. Well, maybe that stroke, the consequences is going to be life-changing. It's going to need, we're going to need all sorts of accommodations and rehab. And where are they going to live? Can they live in the home? Do they have to live in a facility? Do you have to have home care? Can mom or dad take care of spouse? Can you, as the the son or daughter, are you going to step in? What does that look like? And all of a sudden, within the first 15, 20, 30 minutes, these are things that are being kind of thought about from that ambulance ride or from the trip to the hospital. Now, of course, decisions don't always need to be made snap. We hope not. Like if for instance, somebody comes in because their heart stopped, that's a whole nother conversation. But it's definitely something that needs to be decided. And so instead of, all of a sudden this visit to the hospital or the support for the spouse or the support for mom and dad, which really would be great with those visits or that contact, it's all of a sudden, it's what do we do now type of conversation. And what do we do now is a bearer to not only the patient themselves, but to everybody involved, because everybody's trying to think of what is it that mom or dad wanted, and that spouse is trying to make decisions, and they're defaulting, decisions onto the kids so that they can focus on the individual. I mean, you can start to see where this whole whirlwind of grieving process, even from a fall, can really stir families up into what's next. What do we do? What should we do now?
I could see a situation where any one of these happens and you find out for maybe the first time, or you realize for the first time that the spouse has been struggling for some time. And so you've got now we would call the caretaker spouse has got dementia issues or other issues. And all of a sudden we're asking them to make decisions they're just not capable of making. And so that's going to fall to the kids who up until this point may not have even been consulted. The mom and dad have not even explained what's going on to them.
Yes, so many times in all my practice, you'll see the mom and dad say, well, we didn't think it was a big deal. We didn't want to burden you with what's happening day to day. And that's where you find out that mom or dad were literally covering everything for them, even to something embarrassing like incontinence management. Well, incontinence tells us quite a bit of things from a clinical standpoint. And, some people say, well, it's part of the aging process. And you're like, well, okay, that's great. But what that does, what does that do to our fall risk? What does that do to our cognition? Is it because of cognition? There's a lot of questions that need to be asked from something as small as that. But you can you can just see where that type of conversation is not only embarrassing to have with children or to other people that some of the responsibility is going to fall on. You can see why these family members, these parents aren't too interactive with their children. And I see it all too often. We had no idea. Yeah, we didn't want to burden you. We didn't want to think this was a big deal. And then, like you said, sometimes that hospitalization or that trip to the hospital or whatever event happens is the tipping point to identify burnout with that other individual. And now we're dealing not only with split decisions, but now we have to deal with that process of burnout with the other individual. And you in our line of business, I'm sure you see some level of accommodation. A lot of times you'll yin and yang with so someone may be cognitively impaired, and so that other individual will cover them cognitively, but that person's physically good, so they cover them physically, and they create this yin and yang of accommodation, which is great, but not fully understanding the scope of accommodation. We don't know what to do or where to go, and all of a sudden there has to be split decisions and lack of resources, and who's going to pay for it and where they're going. I mean, you can see how chaotic, even in my expression, it is, because it is.
Well, and sometimes you've got the kids who now are finally facing it. They have maybe been in denial for a period of time, and now all of a sudden they can't be in denial.
The reality sets in, and now I mean, I can't even imagine. You reeled off like 20 decisions or 20 different areas that they need to make decisions about, and I want to go back to that in just a minute. That they did not even consider because they wouldn't let themselves understand or believe that mom and dad need some help. And so I could see that as an incredibly complicating factor as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And, you know, I don't want to speak for any hospitals per se, but it is kind of unfortunate that sometimes it takes that hospitalization for that conversation to be had, because the question comes into play, well, what could we have done with weeks, months, or years ahead of time? You know, could we have prevented a lot of these things? And I don't think anybody in the healthcare industry would say anything negative about preventing and talking and good communication before we get to that. Because that stress is also felt to the medical staff per se, because when you're dealing with people that are actively grieving already with the shock of what's happening with mom or dad, you're trying to get the job done that needs to be done. And when people are, you know, I don't know, that's what happens. Medical staff are all, and you know, the stressors kind of push into the, you know, eventually, not saying a lack of care, but we would love it if everybody was concise. One of the things too, like for instance, in hospitalizations, even the communication, you know, let's say we have 6 family members that are all trying to be involved at different levels, and everybody now has something to say because no conversation's been there, or mom and dad, there's been no idea about the deficits that's been there. Well, everybody would love to be involved. Well, imagine that communication. If you were the nurse on the floor, I don't care if you were the nurse in the home, you're trying, or wherever you are in a clinical standpoint, imagine the physicians. It's almost like we need to consolidate down to decisions on who's going to be that point person. Let's drive that communication through that point person, because I don't want to speak for all hospitals or all clinics or all facilities or all home health agencies, but what I can say is better, clear communication to an individual is when they're not having to address multiple individuals. It redirects focus back onto the care for the patient and allows for less distraction for the healthcare professional to do their job. And so that's, that's even just in an operational process from any type of healthcare, you know, facility, whether it's a hospital or a home health agency, even a home care agency. That is something that needs to be, you can see how easy it is just to equal stressful situations on all parties.
Yeah.
Lack of communication, lack of planning. It's and that shock in that system, speaking to the hospital, it's just never a fun process.
So what I see from my side, and I'm not there in a hospital helping to make these decisions, but what I see from my side is a lot of folks who say, well, here's my plan, Mark. My plan is I'm going to go live with my kids. Or, you know, my daughter, she's going to take care of us. She's a nurse. And unfortunately, that's the plan. And then there's no follow-up, there's no discussion, there's no, well, you know, who's going to make decisions, and have we empowered them to make decisions? And so that falls, I guess what you're saying to me is it falls on 2 people primarily. One, the kids, and then somebody at the hospital who's trying to pull all this together, get it down to this set of decisions and this set of inputs. And that's all over the place.
Yeah. I think, you know, the hospitals have become very good at accommodating for the need for split decisions, is the best way to put it, because they've had to. And I don't know if anybody likes that process. I think that, you know, having a clear and concise plan and everybody on the same page and who's going to be the point of contact and how are we going to communicate. Because, you know, for instance, for hospitals per se, let's just talk about that facility. Maybe they're only allowing one visitor. Well, how do, you know, if your plan isn't moldable to that accommodation, all of a sudden, you know, that's kind of a lynch in the pen, if you will. It's something that just throws another curveball that who's going to be the one that's going to go in and visit dad or mom, and how's that going to happen?
Yeah.
And, you know, when they're going, there's day-to-day changes that can occur that could be more restrictive or less restrictive. And those are, you know, if you have a solid plan and there's good communication and we have that point of contact and we know if somebody were to go to the hospital, what our goals are, no matter what the situation is, you know, shines light, then the better off I think families are going to be in more in the moment of that experience, which is sometimes needed, especially if it's their last.
So let's jump ahead for a minute. And then what you've told me so far is scary. Okay, can I just say that? And I know you didn't mean to be scary with it. You're just relating what's going on, but somebody paying attention, that's kind of scary. I think there's one more thing, and you started down this path, and I want to come back to that. So let's say we get to the end of the stay, and now we're working with, say, a discharge planner. Walk us back through all those decisions. What is the discharge planner going to be asking, to put together a plan so that we can send somebody out of the hospital, which is not cheap, regardless,
Right.
Whether you're on Medicare, whether you got private insurance, still not going to be very cheap. So, well, what are we going to need to know?
Well, you know, I could speak about the discharge process on multiple fronts, both as a medical consultant, a receiver of discharges from the hospital, and actively working in the hospital administration, the difficulties on some of these discharge processes. As you know, insurance sometimes is I don't want to say the word restrictive, but it's complicated and ever changing related to the coverage that someone may get based on the situation that person may have. And we've talked about that multiple times in your and I's history related to things such as activities of daily living and accommodations for those and proper savings. So long story short, what resources do we have? You know, that's kind of like the nuts and bolts of anything from my medical consulting to anywhere is what resources do we have? Where is the patient now? What resources do we have? And how do we find a place that meets both that criteria? I mean, that's one of the most important things there. And there's complexities to anything that's involved. It's not often just a clean sweep process. So going back to that clinical piece, so where is that patient at? With appropriate planning and appropriate knowledge of where things are and open communication from the family, maybe there's a preventative strategy we can do with a lot of clinical factors, working with a primary health physician and things like that. So that's a completely different topic over here, but it goes under that preventative category. Secondly is what resources do you have? What's the best insurance? Are you on a Medicare HMO plan? Are you traditional Medicare? Do you have supplementary? Do you have a VA thing that we can counteract? Are we approaching Medicaid planning? Do you have private pay? These are things that happen or need to be talked about and when it comes to that discharge plan, because any lack of resource makes the complexity that much harder to find out where is the best place for mom or dad. And let's say that it is home. Well, that's great. I love how you had mentioned, like, you have the daughter who's the nurse or the mom who's the medical professional, and the plan is to go to them. You and I have discussed this multiple times. In my medical consulting life, I often talk to people with that plan. It's like, okay, so you're going to handle, your dad's moving in with you. You have a full-time job, you have children, and your spouse has a full-time job. And so your idea is that you're going to work from home. Well, let's talk about that looks like. And often I use the meal category as a perfect example. A lot of times families are like, well, you know what, I'll just cook the meals for dad. I'll take care of the meals. And so you say, okay, you're going to cover 2 to 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And all of a sudden you see their eyes kind of go, and you're like, so that's what you're going to do? Oh, no, I don't know if I can do that. And you're like, okay,
Yeah.
what can you do? And sometimes they need the okay. It's okay to give what you can, but then, you know, they come back with, well, I can cook 4 meals a week. And you're like, that's awesome. Thank you for doing that. We now need to find a resource to cover the debt.
Cover the rest. Yeah.
And that's the conversation. And all of a sudden, you know, prices come into play, home care, shopping, you know, how are we, you know, facility. Now we're doing a cost analysis on if it's better to stay at home or at a facility. Does
Right.
the cost justify need or want? You can see how it's just a domino of decision making after that point, when
Well,
it's
and
appropriate resources to make that plan a little easier on the family.
yeah, and the big challenge here, and you're thinking, and people that are watching and going, no, that was a big enough challenge. No, we're going to complicate it by having to come up with that plan in a day or a day and a half. We got to come up with all of that because it happened yesterday or the day before, and now we got to figure it out and then try to get mom or dad to wherever it is that we're going. That is not a lot of time.
No, it's not. Well, and the most important thing that I can tell to people, so let's wipe everything clean. Imagine none of these experiences there. What happens if this was your last 24 hours with this individual? What happens if you had 24 hours left? Do you want that 24 hours spent being, well, your grieving process, I don't even know where it would be,
Yeah.
but stress, what's going to happen with mom, what's going to happen with dad, and where, you know, what do we need to do for finances? I mean, the truth of the matter is I would hope that that last 24 hours could be spent in the moment there and supporting that family member, not, oh my God, I'm going to make a decision. I'm so scared to make this decision. It's life altering, you know?
Yeah.
What are we going to do, mom? What are we going to do with dad? What are we going to do? How are we going to pay for it? You know, appropriate planning allows families to be present and to go through that natural grieving process as they should, with the least amount of decisions that need to be made. I can't imagine that's not the best possible outcome.
Yeah.
You add more decisions in the moment, and it just makes things complex. And a lot of times, families are making decisions for the first time. They have no experience doing it. Sometimes it falls onto I see a lot too, where there's a healthcare professional in the family, and so they everybody stares at them. What's the decision? What's the decision? Well, maybe they've never dealt with this either. You know, maybe they've been in a certain unit, in a certain, you know, specialty. Right. You can just see how the end outcome sometimes isn't what we would all hope. So there's more to it than just, you know, resources. There's much more to it than, you know, what money do we have. It really comes down to, there is a possibility it could be the last 24 hours of your father, mother's, or brother, sister. How do you want to spend it?
Okay. Well,
and how
thank
do
you.
Want your
Oh no, thank you. You've laid this out perfectly. I hope it's a little bit scary for people to hear you. I know you personally. I know you're not a scary person. I appreciate that. But I'm hoping that people are listening going, oh my gosh, I'd never thought of that. That'd be great, Mark. That would be great today if they said, I'd never thought of that. And especially great, what you said is if they would now think about it and come up with a plan. What if that were the last 24 hours? That's incredible thinking right there. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully it resonates, because I see it all too often, unfortunately, in multiple levels of care.
Well, listen, thank you. We are going to probably be referring back to you, even though you're not with us for the rest of this. We'll be referring back to this, and then you and I need to go golfing sometime.
Yes,
perhaps before all the leaves come down. Of course, it's kind of hard to see the ball right now because of all the leaves on the ground.
Yeah, we'll connect at some point.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
All right, very good. That was a lot of stuff that Mark talked to us about. Mark, you noticed, is in the hospital administration nowadays, has a background in nursing. And I can tell you when we recorded that, it scared the heck out of me to hear all that stuff. But there's one thing that he said that resonated with me, and we talked about it a couple of times, and that is, if this is the last 24 hours with your mom or your dad, how do you want to spend it? Do you want to spend it haggling with the siblings, trying to decide, how to move forward? And I know this goes back, we talked about it now a couple of times, and that is, dang it, if we could get people to plan ahead and get some things put together before we're in that situation, it would certainly help. So give us maybe just a little takeaway from what we've talked about today that would help families, moving forward. What are some of the things that if you could stress one more thing that you talked about? So, Jamie, I think you were first.
I really can't stress enough just having advanced directives and being very clear about what your family member wishes are and helping us honor them when we're there. It's very important to know down to the very detail what they want in terms of, God forbid it should get to the point where we haven't even left for the hospital and we need to establish whether we're going to actually give care or not. In a life or death situation, that's really scary. Nobody wants to think about that. But ultimately, I think it really, when you want to spend your final moments with your family member, spending them in a place of peace versus a place of conflict and not knowing what they want or not having everybody on the same page with what they want. I just can't stress that enough. Just the DNR, the advanced directives, if they are going to be resuscitated, okay, yes, let's do this. If they don't want that, then that's okay too. Just everybody on the same page and having that in writing somewhere the paramedics can look at it and just have everything go very smoothly. It's
very important. Thank you. Thank you very much. Gerald, parting shot. What would you have?
I think involve your mom or dad or whoever is going to need the care ahead of time. Basically, okay, if it was to go this way, how would you want it? And if they, like I said, like game plan in sports, you have to adjust as it comes. But if you know what you think you're going to do, it sure helps.
Thank you, Kimberly.
So I know with the years in hospice, every death is different and every family dynamic is different. But I think if anything, if you could have family members, no matter if you disagree or not, to at least come together and not have it be fighting and hectic, but peaceful and just letting them know that it's going to be okay, whether they live through that crisis or that urgency, or they don't, but you want that last moment to be, it's okay and that they're loved. I think that's the most important thing. And to argue over cares or no cares, that can come later, but if it's that urgent, knowing that there's peace, I think is super important. But having those conversations way ahead of time is so helpful, especially when you are a sandwich generation, you have so much going on and you have siblings who are out of state or you have siblings that are in state and you have hands-on. Everybody's perspective will be different, especially when it's emotionally charged. And you may expect yourself to be like, it's going to be fine, I'm not going to, I have everything under control, but when it actually comes, it's amazing how different you feel. But just having those conversations, the more you have those conversations, the easier it's gonna be.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. And I know that we've had the situation where it was hardest on mom to talk about these things. And then we've had the other situation where it was hardest on the kids to have this conversation. So start now. Listen, this will be available. We have it recorded. We're going to have this available. So if you missed something, you were taking notes and you missed something, we'll let you know when you can watch this again. Thank you to the panelists. I think it was awesome. Thank you very much.